Hello, booze and ghouls. It's once again time for my Halloween series. This year for 2022, I am going nostalgic, at least for the people of my generation who grew up primarily in the 90s. I'm going with R.L. Stine's Goosebumps books. Now, for people of my generation, going to the Scholastic Book Fair, that was a huge deal, and Goosebumps was one of the top series. I was more of an Animorphs and Redwall man myself, but nonetheless, these are books that really bring back a lot of childhood memories for a lot of people my age. So this year, you're getting 6 Goosebumps books covered over 5 videos for the Halloween series. Trick or treat. In this video, we're going to talk about R.L. Stine's book, The Scarecrow Walks at Midnight, which is, again, another Goosebumps book. So I actually think this one is reasonably solid in terms of building tension and making this scary. Not necessarily in the sense of like, oh, I'm petrified, but in the sense of suspense, in the sense of tension, in the sense of something uncanny or concerning is going on here. And some of the other books I've reviewed for this Halloween series are not necessarily as solid at that. But The Scarecrow Walks at Midnight, I think, does a really good job with it. So we have these two kids, Jody and Mark. They are from the city, a city. I don't think it's ever specified which one, but they go to stay on their grandparents' farm every summer, and they have these particular traditions that they always look forward to, etc., etc. Only this summer, they come and the traditions are largely gone. Their grandpa doesn't want to tell them scary stories, which he's traditionally always done every night that they've been there. Their grandma doesn't make chocolate chip pancakes, which were the breakfast that they look forward to as part of this visit, etc., etc. Things are different. The only person who doesn't seem particularly different seems different in a different way, maybe is a better way of putting it, is Stanley the farmhand. Stanley has developed a hobby of making a bunch of scarecrows, like well more than are actually needed. And he tells Jody, so it says, he stared up at the scarecrow's face. I made them, he said in a low voice. The book showed me how. They're pretty scary looking, Mark said, standing close beside me. He grabbed the scarecrow's straw hand and shook it. What's up? Mark asked it. The scarecrow walks at midnight, Stanley said, repeating the phrase he had used at the train station. Mark was trying to slap the scarecrow a high five. What does that mean? I asked Stanley. The book told me how, Stanley replied, keeping his eyes on the dark painted face on the burlap bag. The book told me how to make them walk. So we get this element from fairly early in the novel, this idea that Stanley at least thinks that the scarecrows can walk, the scarecrows can come to life. It's not entirely clear whether or not we should particularly believe that, in part because the kids keep getting these sort of naturalistic explanations for seeing the scarecrows move. Like it was the wind that was moving them on their poles, or when Jody sees scarecrows out causing mayhem and whatnot, oh, it was Styx, Stanley's son. He was just playing a practical joke. He's always trying to scare them, etc., etc. So there are these explanations that come up, But there's no real good explanation given for why their grandparents are so subdued, why they seem so terrified, why the grandpa doesn't tell them scary stories anymore, why the grandma doesn't make chocolate chip pancakes, etc., etc. These things aren't explained, and they become this source of tension, particularly for Jody, but for Mark as well, over what's going on here. And initially, Jody seems very much convinced that the scarecrows actually are coming to life. At the end of chapter 13 and through chapter 14, she has this sort of terrifying experience where a scarecrow climbs into her bedroom window and tries to strangle her. And it's her grandpa who's been sort of transformed into a scarecrow. She tries to escape out the door. Her grandmother has been transformed into a scarecrow. And you've got this horrific thing. Then at the beginning of chapter 15, we find out that was a dream. So again, this is a thing that Stine does really, really well in this book, is he gives us these reasons to think, the scarecrows are alive. Crazy shit is going on here. Then he sort of pulls it back and says, oh, well, actually, there's this other explanation for this phenomenon. And so you get that tension built. Toward the end of the novel, we actually have it sort of unequivocally revealed that these scarecrows have in fact been brought to life. Jody and Mark are upset with Styx, Stanley's son. I think I said that. Because they believe that he has been playing this practical joke on them. And one of the things is one of the scarecrows leapt out in front of them while they were riding horses. The horses threw them. Mark injured his wrist. Jody fell on her back. So at that point, they were like, Styx, this is not a joke anymore. This is a serious problem. Jody goes to try and confront Styx with a practical joke of her own, in that they dress Mark up as a scarecrow to try and scare Styx the same way they think he's been scaring them. But what we get here is, you mean it wasn't you, I demanded? It wasn't you trying to scare Mark and me? Styx shook his head. He raised his dark eyes to mine. Dad brought the scarecrows to life, he said softly. Last week, before you came, he used his book. He changed some words and they all came to life. Oh no, I murmured, raising my hands to my face. We were all so frightened, Styx continued, especially your grandparents. They begged Dad to recite the words and put the scarecrows back to sleep. Did he, I asked. Yes, Styx replied. He put them back to sleep, but first he insisted your grandparents make some promises. They had to promise not to laugh at him anymore, and they had to promise to do everything he wanted from now on. So basically that's the sort of gist of it. That's why the changes in the farm have taken place, is because these are the things that Stanley wanted, and he's more or less held this sort of supernatural terror over the heads of the grandma and grandpa in order to extort them. At the end of this chapter, however, at the end of this conversation, it says here that the grandparents are afraid he'll read the chant in the book again and bring the scarecrows back to life, Styx said. He swallowed hard. There's only one problem, he murmured. What's that, I asked. Well, I haven't told Dad yet, but... His voice trailed off. But what? I demanded eagerly. Some of the scarecrows are still alive, Styx replied. Some of them never went back to sleep. So, Stanley finds that out. He goes into full-blown panic mode, because I don't know, anything that upsets him just sends him into a frenzy. So he decides that he is going to wake up all of the scarecrows so he can take control of them. That does not work. He wakes them up, but they are not following his commands. They are doing what they want, and apparently what they want for some reason is to murder all the people. Not really explained why, but they're murder scarecrows, I guess. So the family is sort of out in front of the farmhouse trying to figure out what to do. Stanley and Styx come running up, chased by the scarecrows, because Stanley has been unable to control them. Mark is still dressed as a scarecrow with the ultimate goal of having scared Styx. That goal now, of course, sort of caught up by events. But because Mark is dressed as a scarecrow, the other scarecrows take him to be their leader. So he is able to sort of control them by, he will do something and then they will mimic that. So Jody comes up with the plan for Mark to take his scarecrow head off, with the intention being that the other scarecrows will take their heads off and they will die. Easy peasy, problem solved. Unfortunately, it does not work that way. The scarecrows do take their heads off, but they're just like, whatevs, now we're just slightly shorter. But also, now Mark is not in control of them because he has, a human head, and the scarecrows do not. So they no longer identify him as a scarecrow and as their leader. So they decide, time for some murdering again. So the scarecrows start coming at them, etc., etc. Everybody's about to die, there's nothing they can do, blah, 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 blah. And then Styx comes in. He has apparently escaped. He goes out to the barn and gets something that we had seen earlier, foreshadowing, which I didn't mention in this video, but definitely is there. He gets some torches and he lights the scarecrows on fire, which, as we all know from The Wizard of Oz, is how you deal with the scarecrow. So Styx manages to burn the scarecrows to ashes, and they're done. Curse broken, apparently. Nobody, apparently, is like, hey, Stanley, that superstitions book that you read out of that brought these scarecrows to life? Maybe let's burn that as well. So the novel actually ends. Stanley is still reading from his superstitions book, and a giant stuffed bear from a hunting trip that the grandpa went on, stuffed bear, not like a teddy bear, like an actual bear that was shot and taxidermied. This bear comes to life because Stanley has read from the book again. And if there's one thing that we learned from The Mummy 1999, it's you must not read from the book.